The House of Lords put out a report last December saying Trump must not be allowed to have a second term. Now, when Trump came to London this last couple of days for the NATO summit, the same people were out in force saying again, Trump has to be stopped. Now, they don't quote the individuals who say that, but they say members of the House of Lords or influential City of London people. Now, why do they want to stop what Trump is trying to do? They don't want peace. They don't want an end to conflict, just as they didn't want that with Kennedy.
No,
Why?
No.
This is what Eisenhower, I'm getting to you. If you look at Bloomfield, what does Bloomfield represent? What Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. That's who ultimately called the shots. And what is the military-industrial complex? It's the interlocking corporate boards of directors of financial institutions, the major banks, the major insurance companies, the raw material cartels, the old imperial power. They're the ones who operate through institutions like the Council on Foreign Relations, the International Institute of Strategic Studies in London, the Chatham House, which is one of the centers of British intelligence. They're the ones who are the think tanks that operate on behalf of these corporate interests. So I would say that's who tells Bloomfield what to do.
People like Mike Lloyd, you include in it?
Who?
Mike Lloyd.
McCloy, John McCloy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. John McCloy was an operative for the Rockefellers, Chase Manhattan Bank. You know, that's who we're talking about. You know, you look in Sir Richard Dearloffe. Who does he speak for? He speaks for the most wealthy financiers, the Barclays, the Rothschilds, and others. These are the people who have a policy orientation, and they are used to getting their way, and they control political networks. They control intelligence agencies where if political networks get out of control, they send in people to either bribe or blackmail or threaten or kill. That's how they maintain their power. Because they tried it with Trump. They went to him with this Christopher Steele report right after he was elected, James Comey, the FBI director, on January 7th, 2017, before Trump was inaugurated. And he showed him the Steele report, and he said, Mr. President, we have this documentation on you. We've concluded you were put in power by the Russians. And Trump basically said it's not true, and he told Comey that he should drop that. And Comey left the room saying he felt as though this was his J. Edgar Hoover moment. Remember, Hoover tried to blackmail John Kennedy over his affairs. And he tried to do the same thing with Martin Luther King and with Bobby Kennedy. And when it was concluded by Hoover that they couldn't be blackmailed, they were targeted for assassination.
Because for Kennedy, he had some Russian mistrust, and for Martin Luther King, it was a problem with Hook. But I know this can be confusing I will develop this for the agent. I agree with you that to find the shooter are not really, the shooter are not really interesting. They're just people mandated to shoot.
They're cutouts, as they call them.
They're just the anti-castrists, and then you can kill them to silence them. It's not.
And no one will know.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem are not the shooter. We had any evidence, enough evidence to find that the anti-castrists of the Bay of Pigs have been reoriented against Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs. But the problem is the top 5 personality involved. We got Bloomfield. Probably you can put McCloy in it, but maybe you got other character like Clint Murchison. Do you believe he was involved in it?
No, I don't think so. I think he was a very loudmouth right-winger who was opposed to John Kennedy, but couldn't command something like that. See, if you're going to carry out an assassination like that, you have to know that you can control law enforcement and investigators. And in this case, it means the FBI. The FBI has to be brought in on it on some level. And that's why Hoover was so important. Because Hoover wasn't going to spill the beans because he had been doing this all along. You know, whereas someone like Murchison, he doesn't control what the media can do, what the intelligence communities can do, what law enforcement can do. So you have to look at something higher.
But
if you assume
he can provide money. He can provide money.
Well, he can provide money, and he may have had reasons to want to kill Kennedy, but there are a lot of people who didn't like John Kennedy who didn't have either the connections, the power, or the ability to cover it up.
Okay.
You think about the Warren Commission report. Not everyone on the Warren Commission was controlled or part of the conspiracy. What happened is they were given information by staff that was controlled. And who was the secretary of the Warren Commission? It was Allen Dulles. How do you appoint someone who Kennedy fired for good reason to be in charge?
That's Lyndon B. Johnson who appointed him.
That's right. That's right. But what did Lyndon Johnson say? He said, "Well, we wanted to make it seem as though it was impartial." So that certainly doesn't hold out, does it?
Well, no. I always believed that Lyndon B. Johnson was a really big part of the assassination. Due to his profile, a lot of his political career, you got deaf people with, Malcolm Wallace, who was his killer. He has the profile to do such, and he has a lot to hide. But
Boris, let me just say one more thing on that, which is that in the same way that some people say, well, George W. Bush was behind 9/11. First of all, I don't think Bush is smart enough to do something like that. But he probably was not surprised when it happened. Cheney may have been appraised of it. But, the fact is that Bush was manipulated very easily to go for a police state after 9/11. Now, in the same way, I'm not convinced Johnson was involved in the assassination of Kennedy. But once it happened, he knew he had to protect the people who were, for his own sake and to avoid chaos. So I think he's culpable, he's guilty of not allowing a full investigation to take place.
So you don't believe the Madeleine Brown version, in fact?
No. And I don't believe, I know my friend Roger Stone is convinced that Lyndon Johnson was responsible for it, but Roger hasn't convinced me of that yet.
Okay.